I released a video showcasing my analysis of the Jurassic Park score and how it all combined together to make up the iconic opening horn solo from the soundtrack and concert versions of that theme. Thanks to a bunch of wonderful comments, we have more to add and new theories to look into. I might even been wrong about something. First things first, to get it out of the way, and to those who said anything along the lines of, because John Williams just liked how it sounded, or it's a dinosaur call. Yes, very astute, my dear Watson, and the same could be said for all composers, and looking at all analysis videos or articles, the same could be said that they were just doing an over-analysis, just as I've done here. That's literally the point. Overanalyze to potentially find something hidden whether the composer intended it or not. It's very possible and highly likely that the conclusions were drawn that never crossed the composer's mind when writing the score. It's also possible that any and all relationships found are purely coincidental. I also reflect this in my video where I state that I feel what I found makes sense as to why it works and why the solo exists. So with all out of the way, let's get into some comments. I should have included this scene, as JB8331 points out, where the horn solo is almost in the movie, just a tritone higher and missing the final note. And if you think playing something that high and soft wouldn't work, they did it with the Star Wars trailers. Marc pointed out that this solo is at the beginning of the ride as well, something I was unaware of as I haven't been to one of those theme parks in years and didn't think to look it up.
Time, the ever-flowing river.
In a few seconds, we will be entering Herbivore Valley, where plague-eating dinosaurs roam freely. Keep an eye out for the Parasaurolophus, who likes to splash around in the water. You may even see our new baby Stegosaurus.
This comment mentions about composers writing more music than needed, although it's not like John Williams decided to score additional scenes for the heck of it. When we find additional music that was written, like the Raptor attack or the T-Rex rescue, those were intended to be scored in the first place and were later decided to either be changed or cut. So yes, Williams wrote this specifically for the soundtrack and the more performed concert arrangement, which is a medley of 3 cues. After this newly written intro, there's R3P2, which is the dinosaurs, selections from R14P2, which is the end credits, While yes, the island theme is very similar to R2P3 to the island, the arrangement itself is identical to the credits. The ending is from the previous cue, R13P2/R14P1 T-Rex to the rescue. And this ending was also added to conclude the live-to-projection performance of the movie instead of the original ending, most likely to end on a banger instead of a creepy baritone playing the Predator motif. Back to the new opening solo though. The new material does have to connect with the music written for the film, right? So for example, why not have the Star Trek horn solo or the Prometheus horn solo? Those don't exactly fit, so I analyzed the score finding similarities to see why it worked or why it existed the way that it does. There were several comments like this one from Red Chow that said that the solo did exist in the Jurassic World movies.
You're gonna want to see this!
And for this video, I rewatched all of the Jurassic Park movies, keeping an ear out for that horn solo, and only heard it in the Jurassic World movies, one of which came to theaters 7 months after I released my original video. For The Lost World, Williams wrote a unique soundtrack and rarely quoting the other themes from the first film, and Don Davis did the same for the third, but he actually mirrored the first film with a 4-note motif that opens and closes the movie. Yeah, this motif does sound like a mix of the horn solo and the Predator motif, but anyway, the goal was to explore why it existed in the first film's soundtrack, so the others didn't exist at the time, thus carrying no weight in my exploration and analysis. There were a few comments mentioning that they have never heard this solo, and my bet is that they are either trolling or a part of the population that actually wouldn't recognize it. I did say most people, after all, so it's logical to conclude not everyone would recognize it. I managed to go several years without hearing Baby Shark, and even now with the Pink Fong's version at over 13 billion views, I could imagine that there are still some people that have never heard it. Same thing here. If you haven't heard it before, that's okay, but doesn't make me wrong either. Ellen C4P left a comment comparing the major 7th interval to a minor 2nd, like in Jaws. The two intervals are inversions of one another, so it kind of makes sense, especially in the T-Rex chase.
Go faster.
I don't agree that this was the reasoning, but I can't rule it out either. Speaking of that interval, a couple of comments mentioned the comparison to that interval and Rite of Spring. There are sections that heavily feature that interval, and Fantasia did feature dinosaurs in its imagery, so it kind of fits. I don't think that was a direct inspiration for John Williams, but again, I can't rule that out either. For other comparisons, there were several comments comparing this opening to Venus from the Planets. That's an interesting thought. Williams does write in the style similar to Holst and other late Romantic composers, and the planets were part of the temp tracks for Star Wars, so he has written in that style before, but I don't think it was a direct inspiration here, just two pieces with similar orchestrations. Crunchy Videos brought up an idea that the solo's shape is similar to the island theme. That's not a bad thought, as it would add to the idea of mixing all of the elements from the score into this opening motif. We'd have to ignore the intervals as there aren't any shared, but the shape is at least similar and could be a contributing factor to the motif, especially looking at 11M2 where this opening call has the second pair of notes a step higher than the theme, making the first and last note a seventh apart. Adam Kloffenstein mentioned that this motif might be related or recycled from Close Encounters. I personally think this is a huge stretch since Close Encounters was diegetic for the film, was 5 notes, and the shape of the notes were only similar in direction and not into relation with one another. So I don't agree with this one here. Record intro with Whompy ending? What? Okay, so this comment from Fish Music is not out of left field. Digging around online, you'll find references to this, where on the soundtrack album, the Q3M2, or Reel 3 Part 2 is labeled in this case, they mean the same thing. The horn woodwind harp intro and the harp outro were added in later, with at least the horn solo being recorded at the end of the session from Jim Thatcher's own telling.
You know, the horn solo, that a cappella horn solo in there, he made me play that at the end of the day. We'd play, and this is, you know, this is kind of typical John. John had this little dry testing humor, whatever you want to call it. You know, he and anyway, we'd played all the cues during the day, and I'm just dead tired. He said, "Oh, Jim, I have one more thing for you to do." Unfortunately, it went well, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, John, I'm on my teeth here."
I have not personally seen any reference to this text outside from these forum posts, but at the very least, this does add some evidence that the solo was not intended for the film, as some people have suggested. Also, if you're curious about the Wampy word, no one publicly knows. The main guy behind a lot of the remastered soundtracks, Mike Matessino, he knows, but isn't revealing yet for some oddball reason. Come on, Mike! And there is this comment about putting words to the theme. Personally, unless the composer mentions that it was a motivation, it's hard to prove, and I don't subscribe to that thought. We can add those words to the Predator motif and it fits. Jurassic Park. Or maybe it wasn't meant for this solo, but this section, as Dr. Jeff Lindsay points out.
I'll end back with probably the most celebrated film composer of all, John Williams, and some suggestions for words that might be hidden in a few of his best known tunes. The first two are probably just sheer coincidences, but if we take the two Steven Spielberg films that Williams scored in 1993, just listen to how the tunes end.
To me, that says we are grabbing at straws to make it fit. Don't get me wrong, there is a strong case for composers doing this for some of their themes, but I feel this is making a strong assumption in this case. And yes, I'll beat you to making the comment, yes, this is exactly what I'm doing, trying to make sense of it with the music from the film. My argument to the difference is that using evidence from the soundtrack instead of outside assumptions. A more extreme case is this comment suggestion about Indiana Jones, or going back to Dr. Lindsay's video for this example from Harry Potter.
The theme everyone associates with the film series, and which plays over the title of each one, was for some reason given the name Hedwig's theme. But I think that when John Williams was coming up with tunes for the first film, inspiration may have come, as so often before, from the title page.
As far as I'm aware, Williams wrote the theme about Hedwig, and at the time was not meant as a theme for the series until later. And since it was used as the main theme for the series, why would he use the subtitle? At least for me, it doesn't work. But as always, that's just my opinion, and if you disagree, that's totally fine. If there happens to be an interview with Williams where he states that he uses the title as inspiration, or another argument supporting that idea, then I'll change my mind, but for now, I don't agree. I do have my own comments regarding my analysis though. Looking back, I don't agree with myself that the dinosaur theme's progression played a role in the horn solo and how it works with the score. Going off of my wording, I think I was influenced by this comment in Listening In's video. The first is to understand the harmonic progression of the dinosaur theme that this solo leads into. It has a sense of wonder or religious quality to it, driven by plenty of 4/1 or plagal cadences, which you could think of like the Amen cadence from church.
The music feels like a procession or a hymn, a wordless song for the beauty and majesty of the scene. We get these repeated plagal cadences. There's a spiritual feel to the music, which is further amplified by the addition of the choral texture as the theme develops.
I don't have any notes referencing that video, but I also haven't been the best at citations either, but it seems likely that this was an influence on my thoughts. Anyway, I do think that the dinosaur theme does play a role, but it's more in the starting and highest notes of the first phrase, being the first two notes of the solo. The next two bars center around G before resolving back to F, leading to G making sense for the solo, but it's G flat to mirror more of the danger motif, as was my original idea. Further evidence about the comparison to the Predator motif is in the same scene where the Solo almost exists. To me, it would have been a closed and shut case if the horn went down a tritone at the end, but since this isn't actually a dangerous dino, it shouldn't. There is still some suspense with diminished chords and the flute line seemingly suggesting octotonic as well for the moment. There's also another repeated motif in the score I didn't mention before, so I thought I'd mention it here to be thorough. There's a danger retention motif as well. We hear it at the beginning of the film with the raptor and then again when we first meet the dinosaurs. Again, a sense of tension before being released into the wonderful dinosaur theme. In both of these instances, it's presented in an octotonic way, but when it appears later in the film with a T-Rex chase, it becomes chromatic.
Anybody hear that?
I couldn't find anything tying it to the horn solo, but I thought I'd point it out while I'm here revisiting the score. So, what have we learned? My initial statement that the solo is made from the major elements of the score is still correct as far as I'm aware. However, we learned that the use of this solo in the Jurassic World movies as well as the theme park rides helped solidify the iconicness of the solo. The major seventh might have been a remix of Jaws. It also has a similar shape to the Ireland theme. It was not intended to be in the film, and the title of the movie probably didn't play a role in the solo's creation. Of course, there still may be evidence that I missed, but that's what I love about film music. There's always something new to learn.